Hi there, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Joining me today by Zoom is a woman whom I have interviewed and talked with a couple of times before. She is a wonderful woman. She is a restaurateur, a forager, and the author of Mason Goes Mushrooming. And yes, the show will be all about mushrooms, to include a conversation about the state's new mushroom, which is kind of interesting, I think. I'm delighted to have Melany Kahn here, and I welcome you to the show, Melany.
Oh, it's so nice to be with you again, Pat.
Yeah, this is great. We're by Zoom, but we're going to talk about Melany's restaurant down in southern Vermont, and I'm going, so...
You bet.
We'll meet in person this time. Anyway, so when we talked, I try to remember how long ago it was. We talked a couple of months ago, at least, right?
Yeah.
Because it was in the summer.
Twice.
Yeah, it was in the summer, and then you were going around giving lectures at different places around this area, which was exciting. But in the meantime, our legislature has passed a bill, and it's what bill number? H664. Which designates a state mushroom for us. And you just told me, which I was very excited about, that you actually participated in that discussion. So I'm not going to read my notes. I'd like you to tell us about it. How exciting.
Yeah, well, so Vermont is the sixth state to appoint a state mushroom. Your listeners and watchers might be familiar with, state birds and state flowers. Well, there's six other states that have decided that mushrooms are, fungi, flora, fauna. There's more F's where they came from, right? So, there was a wonderful effort by Michelle Boslin, who's a legislator down here in Windham, and she got together with a group of kids from the Compass School, and they turned it into a school-wide independent project.
Wow.
And she gave them the task of coming up with the best, most appropriate mushroom to represent Vermont. And they did. They did a fantastic job, Pat. They came up with the hericium or the coral tooth or the bear's tooth or the icicle. It has Combs beard. It's got so many great
Right.
names. And essentially it grows in this time of year. Your watchers may see it out in the woods, usually on dead and dying beech trees. And of course we have sadly the beech fungal disease now. And so there's lots of places and opportunities
Huh.
for those mushrooms to uh, become very prolific this time of year. And they're beautiful mushrooms. They do look like icicles and they do look like coral and all the descriptions. They're very easy to identify. They're very easy to cook. They're delicious. Of course, they're very good for you, like all mushrooms are. And so I was very happy to write a letter and testify in support
Right.
of this, and it passed with bipartisan flying colors.
Excellent.
Uh, so, and then we had a big forage and celebration for that this summer.
That's right. And the test is if you could say the Latin name, right?
Yes,
What is the
the
Latin name?
the Latin name is Hericium, and
Vericium.
it's not as hard to say as many of the Latin names of mushrooms are. It's one of the few that I can remember. I'm sad to say that Latin and foreign languages in general were not my forte. So what I
Right.
love is a descriptive word or title of a mushroom that really tells you about it. So, like, for example, the black trumpet mushroom, which is in my book, it's black and it's trumpet shaped. So that's very easy to remember, especially for kids who are just learning, as opposed to the cornucopius, whatever the longer name is. See, I don't even remember it right now. It's
Well,
can't believe.
you mentioned of all the names you mentioned, icicle is the one I perked up because we're going to show a picture of the mushroom, and that's what it looked like to me. Looked like
Yeah.
icicles just falling down. It's beautiful.
It's a very stunningly beautiful mushroom.
Yeah, it's really great. I'm so glad you were part of the discussion. I love when kids do projects up at the State House.
Yeah.
They've done things on political where voting for changing the age of voting, when kids can vote in a primary. I love
Yeah.
it when they come up and work really hard like these kids seem to have. That's great.
Yeah.
Good for
Ditto.
them. So this is your first book.
First and only, Pat.
Oh, post and
I
only. Oh, I
I'm gonna be a one note wonder. I'm gonna be like one of
well,
those 70s rock
I
bands
think oh, there you go.
with
There's a,
one song.
but I think there's a few other books that could stem out of this one though. And your son, who was at the time you wrote this, what was he probably? You were thinking
8.
8, yeah. But
Yeah.
now he's sort of grown up.
He's 21. He's
Yeah, right.
turning 22 on
Wow,
Monday. I can't believe it.
that's great. Good for
I
him.
know that it's crazy. When I'm working with lots of groups of kids, I look around at these kids and their parents or grandparents, and I say to the parents, "Is this will happen to you one day? These little
Exactly.
people will
They'll be,
become big,
pay
right?"
attention, pay attention.
It does
So,
happen.
how come you wrote a book about mushrooms? I mean, obviously, there's an interest and a knowledge, and I think I love mushrooms. I love them. I can't get enough of them.
Yeah.
So, how come you got started writing about mushrooms?
I am just like you, Pat. I love mushrooms. I can't get enough of them. And I was just out at the Telluride Mushroom Festival where you're surrounded by, thousands of other equally kooky mushroom foragers, people with huge amounts of knowledge and lots of, you know, scientific research and so on. But the best part of the Telluride Mushroom Festival was they had a poetry night where they were celebrating mushrooms and how much we all love them.
Oh, cool.
And they had a round in the opera house. And the reason I'm telling the story is that the song that was sung in the round was so emblematic of how much passion people who love mushrooms have. The song went like this. It went, Lord, preserve us and protect us. We've been hunting mushrooms since breakfast.
That's
That's
good.
the whole song. And
Oh,
it
wow.
goes around and around in the
Oh,
round
what
in
fun.
the opera house. Everybody singing, Lord, preserve us and protect us. We've been singing, picking mushrooms since breakfast. And everybody knew exactly what that feeling was,
That's cool.
and
That's
it
cool.
was this like beautiful, beautiful singing moment. But I have felt this urge to go out in the woods and hunt for mushrooms ever since I was a child.
Nice.
And fellow foragers report this same thing. It's like going and hunting for Easter eggs on Easter morning, or running up to the Christmas tree and not knowing, what's in the present under the box, or going out and looking for seashells and finding different ones that you didn't expect. It's that sense of euphoria and aha when you're out in the woods and you see the thing that you're looking for. And maybe you see a lot of them, or maybe you just find the one, but it's very satisfying. And then, of course, the food element of it and the ability to pick your food from your local woods, saute it up, make a beautiful dinner. There's really nothing, it's magical.
Yeah.
And being able to share that, it's free, it's accessible. We live in Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine, and we have so many thousands of acres of untouched woods in which the mushrooms thrive.
Right.
And it really puts you in touch with nature in a deep and meaningful and very present way. So
Nice.
I am, if anything, more enthusiastic and excited about mushroom hunting and mushrooms in general than I was as a child, which I didn't think was possible.
Now, you must have, like your son, learned from what your parents or someone in your life.
Exactly.
Were they
Yes.
foragers as well?
Yes, and I like to teach when I go out mushroom hunting with people, I like to teach that mushroom hunting is the best learned as a multi-generational or cross-pollinated peer-to-peer activity. So, like learning to sew from your grandmother or learning how to hunt or fish from one of your elders, when you're out there doing it with somebody who knows what they're doing, you really can get a full-throated experience as opposed to with the internet or a book or even just studying it as a science. The actual act of being in the woods foraging in and of itself has in it a real value. So not only is the gift of the mushrooms at the end great, but there's also so much science happening in the woods at
Right.
all times. And I have this incredibly unique opportunity to teach about you know, spiders and newts and moss and lichens and the different types of trees and mycelium growing under logs and how the mushrooms are breaking down the wood. I mean, there's just so much going on that mushrooms offer us the opportunity of this window into this
That's
world of
great. That's
science
great.
for kids. So for me, it's a great joy and a real gift to have that opportunity to do that
That's
with
good.
families.
Well,
Intergenerationally is my favorite.
I have eaten more different mushrooms since you and I first talked than I
Really?
have in my entire life. And I think I told you this story. She's going to kill me, but my daughter, even to this day, and she's in her 50s, hates mushrooms. And it used to make me crazy, so I tried to hide it in food. And she'd be eating, and all of a sudden she'd get this look on her face, and her tongue would come out, and there it'd be, this little piece of mushroom on the end of her tongue, and it would get me so mad. I never won that battle. She always won. Because
And I bet the thing she didn't like, Pat, or what I hear people don't like, is the texture.
yeah, that's well, yeah. With it's all
And
mixed in, it had to be the texture. But
right.
I don't taste that. I don't.
Well, so some people, some people love raw oysters, other people, wouldn't be caught dead eating them. It's
Well,
really about what you can what textures you like
yeah.
or don't like. So whenever I'm cooking mushrooms for people who are mushroom challenged, I cook them I cook them very crispy because
Oh,
then you get rid of the texture and you can really get that umami flavor.
and
So
oh,
that's the secret sauce to
and
converting.
how do you make them crispy? What do you do with them?
Well,
Just
you
bake them, or
mentioned that lobster saute
yes,
recipe
right.
that's in my book. So every mushroom can be cooked this way to the great benefit, which is a good medium to high heat on a nice, cast iron
Oh,
pan
okay,
or good
right,
good enamel pan.
right.
Any kind of fat of your choice. I mean, if you're really feeling Luke's, you can do duck fat or nice ghee or butter. You can do good olive oil. You can even do it as a dry flame, but dry pan. But you put them in there, you don't add the salt till after. You really don't crowd the pan. You don't allow steaming to happen because
Nice,
mushrooms are, 90% water. So if you
right.
put too many in the pan, you're going to get a big mushy steamed mess. So you keep them spread out, you keep them nice getting browned, you turn them a
Nice.
few times like you would a pancake. And at the end, you make sure that they've got the browning on all sides, a little bit of crisp at the edge, and then you put them on a pan. You throw some sea salt on, and have people taste them. And
I'm trying that.
everybody, says like that is when you're looking for just the actual flavor of different mushrooms, that is
Right.
the, cleanest and best way to cook
Nice.
them.
Thank you for that. I'm going to try it. And we're going to show a picture of the lobster. One nice thing about this book is that Melanie has included a few really wonderful recipes, and I just got attracted by the name lobster, so I put it
Yeah.
in. But we're talking lobster mushroom, which
Which
we'll talk
taste a
about.
bit
Yep.
like lobster, look very much like lobsters, and have a slightly seafoody taste. I like to
Oh,
encourage folks to try different mushrooms, even if you're just foraging in your grocery store. You can go into the mushroom section nowadays and get a ton of different types of mushrooms, and
yep.
they all have different flavors and different flavor
Cool.
profiles. So you were just saying you have been trying different ones. Have those been at the store or
If they've been
cultivated?
at the Price Chopper or any one of
Sure.
the other stores that I get,
Yeah. And
and
have you found
the
some?
farmers market has had some.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
Nowhere else other than farmers market
yeah.
and you know,
But you've tried some new ones that you're finding you
yep,
like.
yep, and my husband's been enjoying them too. So I
Great.
think it's just great. And
And
you're
how
right,
do you usually
do.
prepare your mushrooms?
I usually saute them, but I don't make them crispy like you. I don't do it as long as perhaps I should. So I'm going
Yeah.
to try that. And I put them in casseroles and
Hmm.
and stews and all that stuff,
Sure.
which they might lose a little bit of their flavor when they're surrounded by gravy. But I'm going to try that.
Well, I think that
They're so
your
funky.
your 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 willingness to try new mushrooms at the grocery store is really great, and I encourage everybody to do that. There's a lot beyond the white, button mushroom,
Right,
and I do always encourage that people, cook them in this way in order to taste the real flavor that's
right,
inherent
right.
in those mushrooms, and then figure out which ones you like the best,
Yeah,
because they're all about the same price point. So, if you like the shiitakes more than the lion's mane, well, by
yeah.
all means,
Right,
cook those.
right. Yep, I have, and I'm kind of swearing off the white button mushrooms. Now that I've gone beyond that,
Yes.
I feel like an expert almost. But anyway,
Yeah.
so in your book, which I thought was wonderful, you put a
Thank you.
note, a little message to future foragers. And could you talk about what you wanted them to know and what you encouraged them to do?
Sure. I mean, future foragers for me are any person, young or old, who develops, what I call mushroom eyes, the ability to see this world of this magical world of fungi that's all around us, and we've sort of ignored. I mean, not only have we ignored it, we've actually been told. You may remember this, Pat, as a parent growing up. What did we all say to our kids when we saw mushrooms?
Yeah,
We said, don't
poison.
touch, don't touch that,
Right,
right?
right,
Not even don't eat it, don't touch it. And
right,
you know what
right,
don't touch it means really is don't learn about it. And don't learn about it is really a shame because there's so much that mushrooms are doing for us on a daily basis.
right,
I mean, they're the yeast in our breads, they're the alcohol in our booze, they're in our good cheeses, they're in our yogurts, in our penicillin, they're breaking down all the soil for all the food that we eat, they're all the good stuff going on in our gut. I mean, it's all based on the fungal kingdom. And to say to a child, you mustn't learn about that simply because there's one or two that we shouldn't eat, it makes absolutely no sense. It's
right,
like, there's some, animals that aren't domesticated. We don't keep them as pets, but that doesn't mean that we don't keep some of them, you know?
right,
So, and also this idea that you can't touch things that you shouldn't eat is also ludicrous because all day long we touch things that we don't eat all
right,
the time.
right,
Our dish detergent, our toothpaste, our door handles, our
right,
everything, most everything we touch all day long, we don't eat.
right,
So you can touch any mushroom you want. And even if it's poisonous, the only thing you mustn't do is ingest a mushroom that you don't know what it is.
right, right,
So when I'm talking with kids and even with teachers and educators and scientists who have this question, they've been told their whole life not to touch them. I'm just really giving them permission to interact with and get to know the fungal kingdom.
right,
And beyond that, you can do it safely. You can do it with an incredible amount of curiosity. And in fact, I'm when you tell people not to learn about something, you actually increase the risk of them doing something they shouldn't do. Because the more knowledgeable and
right,
educated you
right.
are, the less likely you are to do something you shouldn't do. So to me, it makes no sense at all not to share the education of this magical world around us starting from a very young age. And kids are very, very smart. They're very adept. They have super good eyes. They're close to the ground. They can see all the
Right, right,
mushrooms,
right,
right? And they get so excited about it. Like, oh, mushrooms, mushrooms, mushrooms. And just giving them that permission,
right.
that freedom to interact with them opens up an entire world.
But there are mushrooms, albeit maybe just a few, that you really shouldn't eat, right? I mean, they're
For
out there,
sure.
right? And
And
and is
there's
it easy to tell which ones you shouldn't eat versus if you're particularly if you're new to all of this?
so here's how I teach beginner mushrooming. There's over 2,000 types of mushrooms in the woods. So
Wow.
you can't possibly know all of the mushrooms when you go out and look for them. So I try to encourage people to learn one at a time. So, for example, the Vermont state mushroom has no poisonous lookalikes. It's very, very unique. It comes out only on certain trees, only at certain times of the year. It doesn't, if there's nothing that looks like it that would hurt you if you ate it. So
Right.
it's a very good beginner mushroom, right? The all four mushrooms in Mason Goes Mushrooming, my book, the black trumpet, the morel, the chanterelle, and the lobster mushroom, very, very easy to identify, very ubiquitous here in the state of Vermont. So I don't tell people go out and look at all the mushrooms and pick them all and decide which ones to eat. I do the opposite. I say go out looking for the one or two mushrooms that you do know, and then use the other ones
Right.
as a chance to learn more. But
Right.
you're not going out looking to eat, you're looking to educate. And then as you educate, I even myself, I add one mushroom a year to my repertoire of what I can pick because
Yes.
I can't know them all.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
right.
I
Not if
mean,
there are 1,000. Good grief. Yeah.
it's not possible. It's like if you go fishing and you're fishing for, pike and you pull up a bluefish. Well, you may not know what the bluefish is, but you know it's not a pike, so you
Right.
throw it back, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing with the mushrooms. There are deadly mushrooms out there, and you shouldn't eat and pick them, bring them back. So
Right.
you learn, I definitely teach the few mushrooms that do fall in that category. There are a handful in Vermont. And I teach them. They're very,
Right.
very, there's a huge white amanita that doesn't look like any other mushroom that we pick to eat, and I teach it as part of the mushrooms that we learn in the vein of like, this is one that we don't pick.
Right. Right. When you say you teach, Melanie, where do you teach? Do you have a
Oh, I teach
class
all
or?
over the place. No, I teach any place anybody asks me. I always say yes. I mean, I teach all over the country. I've been out in
Wow.
California, I've been in Texas, I've been in Seattle and Minnesota and down south and
How cool.
Florida. And I mean, I go everywhere. But I do a lot of teaching locally at our local public schools, sometimes at private schools. I've taught at all the nature centers around town. I've taught at um, Shelburne Farms. I teach anywhere that has
Nice.
nature
Right.
programming, it invites me to come in and do mushroom forage
Now, I know we're
walks.
going to talk your book. You sort of broke it up by season, and there are certain mushrooms that you can find in different seasons. But when you're traveling, are there different mushrooms in California than they are here in Vermont, or is there some kind of connection to them
Yeah.
all?
I love that question. It's very insightful because mushrooms travel in sort of a seasonal, cyclical way. So when it's January here and we have snow on the ground and nary a mushroom in sight,
Right.
California is having their booming chanterelle season. So I
Ah,
usually go out to California in January when the festivals are happening out there. I go out to Seattle and Oregon, that area in October when it's their season. And then in the springtime, it's other parts of the year, the South, certainly for morels. Morels sort of travel from the South on up here from
nice.
about March all the way through June. So absolutely, the mushrooms follow a seasonality
Interesting.
all around the world. Yep.
That's great. Well, let's just stop a second and talk about what you did here in the book, because you have obviously spring, summer, late summer, autumn, and fall, winter. How and what do you've just talked about the morels? That's spring, right? And
Right.
then you've
So
got
the
early.
morels are the first mushroom in the spring to pop up. They come up at the time that you see lilacs,
Ah,
daffodils,
right,
dandelions, and apple blossoms. And in my book, Mason sees the apple blossoms and he knows that that means that
morel.
the morels are coming out. And scientifically, that the reason for that is has to do with the soil temperature, and
Huh,
then it has to do with moisture and heat and the type of tree that the mushroom has its symbiosis with. In this case, the morel really like elm, apple, ash. Down south, they like cottonwood, poplar, tulip trees. So it really depends
right.
which part of the country you're in for where the mushrooms like to be. But the one thing that is a total non-variable is soil temperature. They only like it
I
at
see.
a certain lowest 55 or so up to about 70. And once it hits that warmth, they just stop. They stop fruiting. So you have a very short, about 2 week window to hunt for morels in Vermont. Usually I'm pretty incommunicado during that time of year because I'm just like looking for morels,
Right, right.
trying to carve out that time. And then there's a little bit of a lull in June, but starting in July, the chanterelles pop up.
Right.
And there's two things that mushrooms really need. One is heat, sunshine, temperature, and the other is moisture. And you're not going to get mushrooms without those two things. So if you have a very, very wet summer with those nice, thunderstormy afternoons
Right.
and those hot days, you'll probably notice there's mushrooms everywhere.
I was
And if you,
actually just going to mention that when we were in camp in Maine, we were camping there for a couple of years. When we had all that, when we had the flood, but before the flood, Maine was our lawn was drenched, and all of a sudden we all woke up one day, and there were mushrooms everywhere in camp. It was just where they
yeah,
come from. It
like
was amazing.
overnight, right?
Yeah, no trees or just the grass, and there they
Yeah.
were. It
Yeah.
was
So
amazing.
what's happening there, which is really, again, mushrooms are so cool. You probably were here when Irene happened and we got 11
Oh yeah,
inches of rain, right?
right.
So I saw mushrooms after Irene here on my woods that I have never seen before and never seen since. And the
Wow.
reason is that the the water, 11 inches of rain, had nowhere to go. So it went deep, 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 deep into the earth, way down into the granite. And there is mycelium probably, growing in the granite back to billions of years ago. So when that water got in there, it woke up some mushrooms that have been, untouched probably for
Huh.
centuries. And they just, oh, you couldn't even walk in my woods. It was like a carpet. I
That's
had never
great.
seen anything like it. And it all had to do with the
Nice.
incredibly copious amount of
Right,
moisture.
right. I was just surprised because I know when we talked about the woods, and no, there's no woods where I was. Well, there was, but they weren't on our property. No, no trees, no nothing, just mushrooms. Now,
Yeah,
would
mushrooms
they be
like
edible?
lawns.
Were they
They could have
edible?
been, sure.
Yeah.
There's something, the classic white button mushroom that we buy at the store. Its common name is a meadow mushroom or a lawn mushroom.
Oh,
And they like to grow in lawns and meadows, the
yeah.
the agaricus family of mushrooms. And also sometimes the giant puffballs like to grow in
Right, right.
pastures. Certainly amanitas grow in fields all the time. Chanterelles sometimes just pop up on your lawns. So
Nice.
lawns are not a bad place. Actually, golf courses, I've found
I
a lot of
bet. Right.
mushrooms on golf courses over the years,
That's
especially
cool.
along the edges. They like the edges of paths and they like the edges of things, edges of lawns.
That's good. And one thing that in your book, what I found interesting is each one of these mushrooms looks completely different and they have amazing colors. Like you
Hmm.
put down the morel was a golden cone with honeycomb fixtures. The chanterelles are bright yellow. The lobster is bold red, which counts for the name, I'm thinking.
Yeah,
And then the black trumpet is obviously dark and black, but it's really cool.
completely.
It's really, and
Yeah.
you know what I love? The underneath of mushrooms.
Oh, that's
Are,
where all the information about them is. That's why you love that. That's where
oh,
they tell their story.
oh, tell me about that. What does that mean?
Well, I've trained people to send me photographs of mushrooms when they're in the woods, and I say, if you send me just the top of the mushroom and it's just this and it's this, flesh colored thing,
Yeah.
it looks to me like the top of a bald guy's head, and I don't know who that guy is,
Right,
right? But
right.
if you send me the
Oh,
underside of the mushroom, that's where all the information and all the characteristics are. It's like sending the face.
huh.
So then I can tell you who the bald guy is. You got to show me the underside, right? Because it's
Interesting.
either going to have gills or a sponge or little teeth like our Hericium
Right.
friend. And all of that information, nothing on a mushroom is an accident. Everything is a clue as to what it is. So the top of the mushroom actually has the least amount of information, usually. And then the underside and the stipe and even the root ball will often give you lots of clues.
Oh. Now
Yeah,
I have something else to do in the price jumper.
there you go.
Go
Yeah.
look. What are
Well,
you doing? Looking underneath the mushrooms.
yeah,
So,
trying to see what they are.
yeah, right. That's really fun. This book is I enjoyed it. I'm assuming it's supposed to be for somebody a little younger than me, but growing up, I bet your son had just a great time going out with you, and
Uh,
it's such a family thing to do.
it is, and I'll tell you a really funny story about Mason the other day. He told me the story and it just cracked me up. He said, um, he said, Mom, we had one of those icebreaker games at college where you have to say something about yourself that nobody would necessarily know as a way for them to get to know you.
My God.
And he said, I'm a mushroom forager and there's a book named after me. And he said, and nobody would believe me.
That's
I made
priceless.
it up.
That's it. At least he could prove it, right? When he,
Yeah, I thought that was, I said,
that's so
that's a
cute.
pretty good
That's
icebreaker.
really,
Yeah.
well, I bet he loves the book too. And we were talking before we started taping that your illustrator, whose name is Ellen Korbonsky, it's worth getting the book. Besides that, it's fascinating to read. But the what she's done with the illustrations, maybe because they're all my colors. You know, when you do that
Yeah.
my color thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole book is my colors, so I'm
Yeah.
naturally drawn to it. But it is beautiful the way she does
Yeah.
the
I actually,
animals and
I
Oh, you've got it
actually,
on you. I've
I
got
have
mine
it
too.
here, and I'm going to show you a page that knocked my
Okay.
socks off because she would send me, rough outlines of these pages, but every once in a while they were just 100% great right from the beginning.
Yep.
But this page here, so she sends
Oh,
me,
yes, right.
this is the lobster page,
Yep.
and she sends it to me like she's just dashed it off, you know?
Wow. Oh,
And
something
I'm
to,
looking at this, and she's got this round thing of fish here, and it's
right.
so clever, and these beautiful, all in watercolor.
Wonderful.
And I just said to her, like, Ellen, how do you do that?
Right,
And
right.
you have such a gift. And she's very humble. And she's like, oh, I just, sit down and draw. But this, I
I
think your
couldn't do
readers
that.
will recognize
Yeah,
the
right.
Creamery Bridge from Brattleboro, Vermont.
Oh,
So,
perfect. Right.
and the
The
parade
truck,
that
right,
happens in
exactly.
Brattleboro. Yeah. So she took a lot of things from her experience of being in Vermont, and I feel like the book is really it's a love story to Vermont because it's all about the nature, the natural world that we have here, and the freedom that this child has to go and explore it that is lost on a lot of kids these
Right.
days.
Well,
So,
and because I think you and I love when you go to a restaurant that says farm to plate, and then on the
mhm,
menu they'll list, Farmer
where they
Joe's,
got
the
it.
eggs from Farmer Joe's, and the
Yeah.
mushrooms from whoever. I love it. I
Well,
love that.
speaking of restaurants, because you and I are going to have a date at our
Yes,
restaurant,
we are.
but our restaurant in Brattleboro, Vermont, if anybody of your watchers ever wants to stop by, we are very much a farm to plate
Excellent.
place. It's called the Porch Cafe. We're only open Monday through Thursday for breakfast and lunch, but killer great breakfast all day long. And we source as much as we can
Right.
locally, including all of our fresh maple syrup from Bunker Farm and our
Nice.
greens from the folks down in Coleraine and tomatoes that we grow ourselves and flowers that we put out every week that are from my gardens. It's very much a family
That's
effort. We
nice.
grow a lot of our own herbs. So that's the Porch Cafe. And then my husband, who is co-owner of the Porch, um, just went and bought himself the Chelsea Royal Diner, which is over in West Brattleboro.
Wow. Excellent.
It was been closed for a long time and he wanted to resurrect it. So he is in the process of bringing back this, 1930s diner.
Oh, oh, I
And
love it.
he's also doing some very, making their own ice cream, a 16% butterfat ice cream, very, very yummy.
Oh,
And lots of, homemade and fresh food there at the diner as well. So if anybody's coming through Brattleboro, stop on by and say hi to
that's
us
great.
and visit with the folks who are in the state making good food.
That's
We're
what
so lucky in this place.
I really appreciate that you're doing it, but I also appreciate eating at those restaurants. It makes the food, I don't, maybe it's in my head, but it makes the food taste better because it's right down the street and it hasn't gone from California to Florida to
That's
Vermont
right.
and it's
And
just
when
great.
I have Pat extra mushrooms, or somebody will come to me and say, I found this huge hen of the woods. Do you want it? And of course, I always say yes. And even if I don't have time to process it, I know I can take it over to Gretchen at the restaurant and she'll make an incredible soup with it.
Great.
Well, I even have a deal going with some of my foraging friends. They say, hey, if you bring us the mushrooms, you get it back in soup.
Oh, wow.
So that's a really nice
Nice.
deal because if you get too many mushrooms, you want to bang your head against the wall. You're like, what am I gonna? I don't have time for this,
That's
right?
great.
Like, and that can happen with some of these really big shelf mushrooms.
Yeah.
So she will make wonderful fresh mushroom soup from it.
That's great. We have a very high-end restaurant here called the Hen of the Wood.
Yes,
And
I'm familiar with
It's
it.
in Waterbury, and I wonder how many people know that that's a mushroom.
Yes, I
Um,
am totally familiar with Hen of the Wood restaurant. I've actually eaten there,
yeah,
and I think it's very mushroom inspired food. I think he likes to use a lot of mushrooms in
yeah, I
their
guess so. Yeah,
cooking.
because I've eaten there. They've moved from maybe where you went in that stone house. They moved down in downtown Waterbury, but it's still fabulous. So
Yeah, yeah.
he's done a
They're
great
very
job.
popular now.
Yeah,
That's
very nice.
wonderful.
So, we're talking about restaurants and about people, and you and I had a discussion about the impact mushrooms have on the economy. And I think people would be blown away by what the mushrooms can bring in market. The amount of money, if you have enough of them, maybe, I don't know if you know these numbers off the top of your head, but it's really staggering.
Well, not only that, but I'm going to hold up an example for your what your this is in not insulation, packaging
Oh, right.
made
Oh, right.
from mycelium, grown packaging, right?
Really?
This is grown in Troy, New York by some folks at Ecovative who
Huh.
are also making a fabulous product called My Bacon out of mycelium, which is available now, certainly at the Brattleboro Food Co-op and at the Burlington one and over in Keene. Um, Amazing bacon out of mycelium. So they are finding purposes for
Wow.
mushrooms well beyond just the, mushroom counter at the supermarket, and lots of uses for them that are innovative and, of course, very climate friendly because
Right.
this particular packaging, for example, is taking an agricultural waste product out of the waste stream, inoculating it, using it instead of a product that would have been petroleum based, like
Right.
styrofoam, putting it back into the waste stream in such a way that it just decomposes and
Wow.
in 2 weeks becomes soil again. So incredible products.
Excellent. And but while it's doing its thing, it's keeping the air out of the food and
Yeah, in this case,
water resilient
they
or
yep, they actually I was at the New York Botanical Gardens last week presenting because they built an entire house at the Botanical Gardens that your viewers, if they're down there stopping by, which is a wonderful place to visit, they built a whole brick house that's on display. I think it might be on permanent display there now, out of the mycelium bricks, as an
wow.
example of the types of building products that can be done with this new technology. So,
Amazing.
when places like the botanical gardens, which are, pretty traditional, mainstream places, are giving a, hat tip towards alternative building uses made with mushrooms, I'm pretty excited about that.
That is who would think? I mean,
Who would
seriously,
think?
kudos
Yeah.
to the scientists who are saying, "Hey, maybe
Yeah.
we
If
can."
anybody wants to see a picture of it, it's up on the
Yeah,
New York Botanical Gardens website, and it's a really cool building.
nice. Well, let me just run. I have some of this. It says global mushroom market size was valued at U.S. dollars 4.9 billion. That's with a
Woo!
B, and
Woo!
in the 2030 market, it's supposed to reach 115.8 billion.
No,
And
that's
isn't
crazy.
that incredible? Then the U.S. mushroom market is estimated to be over 4 billion, growing to 9.2 billion in 2030, and it credits the industry with 21,000 jobs. But if this keeps up, what you're talking about, that's just going to triple for heaven's sakes. And that every pound of mushroom has a $3.30 economic impact in the U.S. Eat those mushrooms, people.
Eat them. And that doesn't even, those facts are so stunning and so wonderful. And it doesn't even begin to explore the really good other reasons for, leaning
Well,
into
I mean,
mushrooms.
health wise, right?
Health wise,
Yeah,
oh my goodness. I mean, the benefits of eating mushrooms on a daily basis are just, data driven, scientific, proven. Super low calorie food, very high in proteins, all sorts of minerals that are not that available in other foods, lots of good aminos, lots of good digestion, lots of fiber.
mm,
And one of the things that is not spoken about much, but I really like to point out, if you go foraging in your backyard and you are picking, let's say, chanterelles or
right.
black trumpets, and you have learned what they are, somebody's taking you out there, this is your patch, you're picking them, you're eating them, you're also getting all of the micronutrients that those mushrooms are surviving in and thriving in your own system. So it's like if you go to Mexico and you can't drink the water because your digestive system is not attuned to it, but the
Right.
people that live there can drink it just fine, right? It's the same exact thing. It makes you more immuno resilient and resistant in your own area to uh, nourish yourself with mushrooms that are growing from our earth. Because by definition, you're getting some of those nutrients and some of the microbes from the earth because there's gills and they're all in there.
Right.
And sometimes you get a little friend, a little pet in there, a little extra protein.
That's great.
But anyway, yeah, so there's lots of good reasons to eat foraged mushrooms.
Well, I love them. I don't know. So yeah, I've also read that there's a lot, like you do, there's a lot of tours and classes around Vermont, not just
Yes.
the things that you do, but there's a lot of our nature
Yeah.
centers have
Yep.
classes, and I think that would be
Yep.
so worthwhile and interesting.
Yeah, when people say, how do I get to do this more? I encourage them to do a number of different things. Um, Here in Brattleboro, we have a wonderful mushroom club, and all
Ah,
throughout different states, we have clubs, and we go out on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock all over a region. I call it church, other people call it foraging, but it's every Sunday at 10, and it is just the best. And that's what we used to do with my family, every week. We'd go out on Sundays, and that's really where I learned a lot from some very smart, wonderful foragers, and they're eager to share their, knowledge. It's
right.
peer to peer, colleague to colleague. You're looking at mushrooms together and deciding what they are together. It's really enriching. So I encourage people to join their local mushroom clubs. You can go on the website for the North American Mycological Association, otherwise known as NAMA, and they have a list of every state and all the clubs listed in each state. So that's one thing. And then there's a bunch of Facebook groups and groups online that are specific to our region.
Huh.
And even if you can go on those and lurk and sort of see what people are finding, but you can also say, hey, does anybody know where to go mushrooming around here? Does anybody want to go mushrooming around here? And we've done some sort of spontaneous hikes that way, with in different parts of the state with really nice attendance. People would come up out of nowhere simply hearing about it on Facebook.
That's
So I
great.
recommend that. And then the last thing is to keep in mind all of the nature centers all around Vermont do have some mushroom programming. So I've spoken up at the North Fork, what's it called?
North Branch?
North Branch,
Okay.
North Branch. I mentioned Shelburne, but they have other wonderful people who come there yearly, and you can sign up, for those events. So keep your eyes out at your local nature centers for who they're bringing in, or ask them, if
Yeah.
they will bring in some mushroom foragers. There's a wonderful place here in New Hampshire called the Harris Center that has a couple terrific mycologists on
Oh,
staff, and they
that's
do
the word. You use the mycologist,
mycologists,
and
yeah.
what is that? Somebody
A
interested in
mycologist is
mushrooms?
somebody who has a love of and an interest in studying mycology, which is
Mycology.
the study of mushrooms. So the
Cool.
word myco, MYCO, is essentially the base root of mushroom,
Okay,
the
I
the
heard
Latin.
that when you said it a little while ago, and
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on that. Um, and you also talk. I mean, you were talking about sustainability, and mushrooms are always going to be there, right?
You
So
bet.
they're in salads and restaurants and soups, and they're just everywhere. And how good is that? That's great. But you don't see too many of the unusual ones out in restaurants so much. It's usually the basic, the little white ones and that sort of thing, because the others are probably more expensive, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, we get at the porch. We get our restaurant and catering mushrooms from a fellow at a farm called Slipstream Farm, which is in Williamsville, right outside Newfane. And and when you were telling me about those numbers, I mean, I've been up and seen his operation, and he's got these grow rooms where he's cultivating mushrooms, and he sells them every week at the farmers market in Brattleboro, and I think also maybe in Londonderry. And they're phenomenal mushrooms. They're so
Oh yeah,
tasty and so good and so fresh. And he's harvesting them every 3 days. So you know that the mushroom that you're eating was growing, just a day or two ago.
that's
So
great.
yeah, I love supporting our local mushroom growers, cultivators.
I think
That's the second best thing to forage mushrooms. It's cultivated.
and we were also talking about while you're out there. There's fruits and flowers. Is that something that you talk about when you're out? Because a lot of people know there are flowers you can eat. You find them in salad sometimes, and all the
Yeah.
berries. That's the same. I was taught
Yeah.
the same about berries as I was about mushrooms. Do not eat them because you'll die or something. But they must ask you when you're out about
Yeah.
those. Do you have a little knowledge
Well,
about
sure.
that?
Um, this is probably not a good point to say enough to be dangerous because that could actually be true. But so I like to stay in my lane, which is, wild, edible,
Oh, of course,
beginner,
right.
mushrooms. That being said, I have my own personal curiosity about a lot of things that I see out in the wild. I certainly am familiar with our lovely ramps that come in the springtime, which is the wild onion,
Right.
leek, and things like watercress or wild blueberries or wild strawberries. I don't get into some of the more exotic plants that folks that are doing um, plant foraging do.
Right.
And
And
sometimes the
fit
plant
and
foragers don't really do the mushrooms either. It
yeah.
is two really separate sort of lanes, and
I'm a
I try to keep
fiddlehead person.
love
Oh my
fiddlehead
God,
ferns.
that's
I
great.
definitely know how to identify those. Yep.
So Ellen has drawn in here a lot of animals. Do animals eat mushrooms?
Oh, I love that question. So if you saw in the last chapter with the black trumpets, Mason has learned that black trumpets are easier to find when you follow the deer tracks in
Right.
the woods
Right.
and you see the deer scat because black trumpets are eaten by deer. And I have certainly experienced that firsthand when I'll go to pick one and the top is all sort of nibbled off the way like they do your hostas in your
Right.
garden and you get really mad at them.
Yes.
So, yes, indeed. There are a couple mushrooms that animals will eat, mostly because they're very tasty, which the black trumpets are. The biggest animals that eat mushrooms are slugs, worms,
Oh,
bugs. All of those animals
right.
eat a lot of mushrooms. I have seen boletus, which are also very tasty, spongy mushroom, gnawed on the top as though a chipmunk or a
Oh,
squirrel has gotten in there.
right.
You can see the little teeth mark.
Yeah.
So I have personally seen the evidence of animals enjoying mushrooms. Yes.
Nice. Well, I
I
know.
did. I don't know if they follow any recipes. I think they just.
Well, I was going to talk about the recipes in the book. That's why I was thumbing through because I think you've got one in each season.
I do.
Yeah,
One
and
for each mushroom.
maybe the first one was the morel omelet,
Yes.
and
Yes.
these are really easy to follow. They're
Well, I
they're
tried to
not too
make the recipe.
complicated.
Right, I tried to make them easy for kids
Yep.
to do with their parents, and I do a lot of teaching of cooking with kids and teaching them,
Oh, nice.
knife skills. Mushrooms are a really good thing to learn knife skills with because they're pretty forgiving. Um,
Oh,
oh, there's Marvin saying hello. And then the most complicated recipe in there is probably the pasta recipe,
yep.
but it's a real crowd pleaser because you've got pasta, Parmesan cheese, garlic, mushrooms, cream.
Yeah,
You
heavy
just can't
cream. You
go
can't go
wrong.
wrong with butter and heavy cream.
You can't go wrong.
That looks
Yeah.
great. I'm looking at it now. It looks wonderful. Of course, I think I've told everybody this. The whole Vermont. I'm allergic to garlic. Can you believe that? I mean,
Oh, you're
I
not the
mean,
only one. I talked to somebody the other day. Alliums? Are you allergic to all allium or just
no,
garlic?
just garlic, just
And you
garlic.
get an upset stomach?
No,
Oh,
well,
worse.
no, we don't talk about it. Usually, the discussion comes right over dinner, and we try not to talk about it much. But anyway,
No,
the one I'm going to show on the screen here is lobster sauce because
yeah.
that's from the lobster mushroom. And you
Yeah.
said it. I haven't found them anywhere. Lobster mushrooms.
Yeah, they're actually a really good beginner mushroom because their color is so unique. It's like
Huh.
this hunter orange, that it stands out in nature as though it shouldn't be there, right?
Great.
And so when you find them, you usually find a few, and they're usually pretty dirty because they have a sticky substance that grows on top of them, which is designed to have the leaves stick to them so they
Yeah.
can't be seen as well, because they're actually pretty popular
Cool.
with little
And
creature.
where do they grow? Because in the book you give hints about sometimes it's under
They like
logs
a
or
hemlock forest. They like a nice, they love to be along paths. Often they'll just crop up in the middle of the road and you'll see, a path in the woods and you'll see a
huh.
lobster mushroom right there. They're a little bit like chanterelles where they're not that picky. They'll show up with they're
Wherever.
not, they don't care which trees so much. They just tend to come back in the same spots year after
Nice,
year.
nice. And I think was that the last one? No, there
The
must be
last
one.
one
Oh
is
no,
the
one more
black
here.
trumpet
Right,
chip, and
right.
that's a very simple recipe for those of you who have kids at home who maybe you're trying to encourage to eat more mushrooms. If you slice them up fairly thinly and you put them in the oven as if you would like with a kale chip or a potato
Yep.
chip, and you just
Oh,
hit them with that high heat and a little bit of olive oil, they crisp up beautifully. And in my house, when you took the black trumpet chips out of the oven, like, you better act fast because the kids were like, fighting over them.
give
So
me.
you can do it with any mushroom though. Just cut them rather thin so they can get that chance to crisp up.
I'm going to report back and see if I can I'll bring it up for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, see if you can get your
See if I
daughter to eat one.
sneak it in with other things like you just suggested. Yeah, because this is the recipe, three things: mushrooms, olive oil, salt and pepper. Not hard. I could do
Nope.
this.
Yep.
That the
Yep.
lobster one looks a little more complicated, but oh, the smell must be wonderful. So you will really enjoy this book, folks. It's got wonderful pictures. Kudos to Ellen, the
Yeah.
illustrator.
Ellen
Seriously,
is Ellen is the best.
that's great.
And
So you,
I hope that she has a chance to for her this was also her first book. And
oh,
she's done a lot of illustrating in like she did illustrated like an herb book and some smaller things, but not where it was, what I did with my book was I put my name and her name the
good.
exact same size
There
because
you go.
this was a true collaboration.
Well,
This was
it really
anything
it
but.
helps. I mean, it's delightful to read the words because they're surrounded by graphic graphic illustrations. So, and I'm a very visual person.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I have to. I always have the TV on. I don't watch it or listen to it, but I like to see the people and movement and stuff. This is a fabulous book. It's on Amazon, and I have it on Kindle. So
Great.
it's very easy.
Great.
Could we spend another few minutes, though, before we have to end the show, talking about your restaurant? I think that would be good, the kind of restaurant and
Sure.
what kind of food. Do you cook, or is it your husband, or do you have...
So, I'll start with talking about the Porch Cafe, which is located between exit 2 and exit 3 in Brattleboro, right off the highway. The Porch Cafe, we opened 10 years ago. It's our 10-year anniversary, and we started it as a food truck in my
Oh, great.
husband's manufacturing company's parking lot, literally. And Bo has a business partner named Gretchen, and she's significantly younger, and so she has a little bit more, oomph to start a business. And so she graduated from the Culinary Institute, the CIA, and she
Whoa.
was from where we live in West Chesterfield. And so she and Bo got together and built this food truck, and she grew so fast. In within 3 years, I mean, she had a hose and a extension cord. I mean, this is very,
Right,
very
rudimentary, right?
tough, rudimentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
But within 3 years, she was catering weddings all around the region, catering big events, and she had simply outgrown the food truck. So there was a former sandwich shop in this strip mall in Brattleboro, right next to the pet store, and it had been a D'Angelo's originally.
Ah,
And it then went through four different iterations of different sandwich shops, all of which flunked, and it was closed. So this was what in 2015 or so. And so my husband Bo went to the owner, and it was had been sitting there empty. So he, negotiated a really fabulous deal. And probably the owner thought, oh, you'll be the fifth sandwich shop to try this
yeah.
out and close.
Right.
So we made Bo sign a very long lease because he thought he was really, pulling one over.
Right.
It was great. We're like, okay.
Yeah,
So
right.
we have this, nice setup, and it was very rustic. It was really run down, and it had an old parking lot next to it with a fence that was falling down. And so over these years, we've built a garden, we've put in a pergola, we've got a gorgeous seating area outside. The inside's been, lightly redone. It certainly doesn't look quite as shabby anymore, but it's nothing fancy. They just put out really good food. It's a place for the locals. We get all the EMTs and all the firemen and all the
Great.
policemen every morning. You walk in anytime and you have to sort of say hi to everybody before you can get your food. And it's a wonderful place. And I'm very proud to say that during that time that we don't talk about, we
Yeah,
never shut
right.
down one single day. We
Good
stayed
for
open the
you.
entire time. We employ between the full-time help at the restaurant and all of the events that Gretchen does for catering. We employ, I think, upwards of 60 people now.
Wow.
Uh, well, the events are, really great for part-time workers,
Yeah,
people,
right.
moms and people who have other jobs during the week, want to work a wedding on the weekend and make a few hundred
Right.
dollars in a short amount of time. And Gretchen does lots of weddings all around the southern part of the state now. So that's the porch. And I really welcome and invite people to come in and try us out. You can look, it's
That's
called the
great.
Porch 2 online. You can look it up. And then the diner is coming to life, the Royal Diner. It's going to be Totally renovated and opened for the inside part this winter, and Bo opened the restaurant window and the ice cream shop this summer.
That's
And
great.
everybody in town was very happy to have ice cream on
Not
that
like you
site.
had much to do anyway, but
I worry when people look at our lives that they might think we're a little schizophrenic. We're not. We're just
no.
very passionate and
No.
very engaged. We also have 4 kids who are doing their
Oh
own
my
thing.
word, Melanie. I hope you're putting them to work a little bit. Do they like
Well, the two
working?
of them are in college, and ten. One of them is in St. Pete Beach right this second, braving
Oh,
out Helene. So we're
whoa.
gonna
Well,
check in with her later.
yeah, we'll
I
keep
actually have
fingers
two down
crossed.
in Florida, so we're monitoring that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway,
Yeah.
this has been delightful to have you on,
Oh,
and I
thanks,
promise
Pat.
you,
Me
we'll
too.
be down and
Well, let's make offline, we'll make a date, and
okay.
I'd love to meet your friend, and I'd love to
Yeah,
offer you lunch at the porch.
that's right. Well, we'll talk about that, but we would like to eat there for sure. But anyway,
Right. Well,
Melanie Kahn.
when you own the place, you don't pay
Well,
for your lunch, okay?
well, all right. Well, we'll talk about it. Anyway,
All
Melanie
right.
Kahn, thank you very much. Please
Oh,
go and
such a
look for
pleasure.
Mason Goes Mushrooming. Shout out to your son, who's now a grown man, but look what he's got as his legacy, for heaven's sake. How cool. Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites.